Hello and welcome back to the Fearless and Fabulous podcast. This is the space where women thrive no matter their age or size. I am your host and creator, Melanie Robinson, and today I have such an amazing guest. I met her at a function that really celebrated women. It was called Celebrating You, and she is Miss Asha Hardnett, and she is a poet. She is a purpose doula, which she will explain what that is. She's an author, and she is just a force of nature and truly fabulous. Welcome to the show, Asha.
Thank you for that amazing introduction. Wow. Yes, I am happy to be here. I love the space that you created at that event. I could tell you were a light, and I'm like, I just want to be in her space. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. And regarding a purpose doula, like I am the person that people call when they know when they're pregnant with purpose. If you are a leader,
Mm.
an organizational leader, a leader in the community, I work a lot with CEOs and executives who have titles, who have letters behind their name often, but something in them still feels unfulfilled. Or somebody
Mm.
who feels like they were trapped in their cubicle. I know I remember being trapped in my cubicle. I felt like there's got to be more. I loved my job. It was great community work, but I knew that it wasn't what I was created to do. And so I have created a formula that walks people through how to push out purpose. If you're pregnant with purpose, just like in when it comes to labor and delivery, a midwife can say, hey, you're 3 centimeters, you're
Mhm.
10 centimeters, kind of know what happens when the baby's coming. I figured that what that looks like when it comes to walking in your purpose. There are signs,
Mm.
there are symptoms, there is a process. And I absolutely love walking people through that process.
It's such a unique idea because I think it is something where many people may feel this. They may feel, especially when they get a certain point in their lives. I'm 55 and I found myself kind of questioning a little bit, like, I feel like there's something else. I'm just not, entirely sure what it is. And I know I'm not alone in that. So, what got you into this idea of being pregnant with purpose? Like, was this something that you created yourself, or did you meet a mentor who had this similar idea?
That's a great question. It is something I felt.
Hmm.
Um, my organization, I run a mentoring organization called Beauty Time Inc. We actually made 13 years on May 6th as our official anniversary. And I say she when I refer, if you hear me refer to things, I personify a lot of things. But when that organization started, it literally was a 9-month process, almost to the day, from the day that I
Wow.
wrote the proposal, and I had physical symptoms that were like I wasn't able to sleep when we were
Hmm.
creating things. I was woken up in the middle of the night and it was like, okay, pray and prepare. So there was a clear, when I went back in my journal, there was a nesting period that actually happened before my organization was launched, before we ever had a meeting with the girls, before I ever met a parent, before we even created a flyer and invited people. The idea of what it looked like was actually, it literally lived in my body. And I had never heard of anything like it before. I heard other people talk about being a midwife for like
Hmm.
books because I was one of the things that I do as a purpose doula is a lot of people their purpose might be connected to a book. And
Yeah.
so a lot of people I've heard of people midwifing people through writing a book. And then I realized I'm like, this is something bigger because once people write books in my ecosystem, the book is actually the beginning of the process. A book is a business
Ooh.
card. And so I'm like, okay, it has to be something different. And I started hearing a friend of mine was expecting, and I heard of a doula. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, well, what's a doula? And so a doula is actually somewhat similar concept to a midwife, but the way their process is, a doula can come and help someone get pregnant, walk you through what the process looks like to become expecting, like to carry a baby.
Yeah.
Um, I've even heard of end of life doulas, people who walk
Right.
people through the process of ending, what the last stages of life looks like. But when it comes to birth, a doula can actually help you raise the child, stay with you overnight. And so it gave a little bit more flexibility. And I started doing research on what the process was to become an actual birthing doula, what their journey is, and what they care for. And I realized, oh, I do this with people's ideas.
Hmm.
My entire life, I've always been the person, like, people call me, have always called me for, hey, Asha, I have an idea. I have an idea. I want to do this. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Now do this. Boom, 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 boom. And I can come up with a strategy. And so when I married my husband, who is an expert strategist, one of the things that he helped me do was realize, put it into a formula, put it into document it so it's a repeatable process.
Yeah.
Once you have a repeatable process, you can walk more people through it. And then people know what they're getting. And then we were able to turn it into a business that actually helps people. And so that's how doula came about. And yeah, I did some research, heard about what a doula was, and I said, you know what? I think this is what I do when it comes to someone's purpose. And I think it fits.
It sounds so, it just sounds cool to
Thank
me,
you.
right? And I've never heard of anyone who did this. Like I've certainly heard of, life coaches, but when I hear life coach, I don't know, it has more of a therapist kind of connotation around it, even though it's not really that.
Yeah.
But when I hear of, a doula, I know what a doula is. That's something I'm aware of. And so I think it was really smart to, have this idea of a doula, and then you're helping people to give birth to whatever their purpose is going to be. And
Thank you.
so I think that is just a unique way of looking at things. So
Thank
let me
you.
ask you this. How did you give birth to this purpose that you now have?
Ooh, yes, with much pain and and I mean, that's part of the process too, right? It was realizing that my pain had purpose. So I tell my story in two ways. My life story sounds like this. I'm going to tell it to you really briefly in two ways. And this isn't my full life, but kind of what launched me into this space. In
Yeah.
2018, I lost my job. I had relocated from Chicago to do work a career that I absolutely loved. And a month later, my mother passed away,
Mm.
and then 6 months later, or within the 6 months, found out that my boyfriend at the time was expecting a baby, and
Mm.
I wasn't pregnant. And he
Mm.
wasn't pregnant, right? And I
Mm.
was like, "Oh, that's interesting."
Yeah.
And then I tell the story this way, same story, same. In 2018, I was released from a job that was actually holding me back. It was a crutch. It was holding me back from doing what I was actually called to do. It took up so much of my time that I really didn't have the mental and emotional capacity to explore what I was called to do. And then a month later, my mother was planted. She is in heaven doing what she absolutely loved to do when she was on earth, which is worship God. And that's why I know I have no questions about where my mother is. People say they lost parents. I have a poem in my book that says, I didn't lose my parents. I know exactly where they are, right? And
Oh.
then 6 months later, I was released from a relationship with a man who did not love me. He didn't
Mm.
care about me. He didn't have my best interest at heart. And it was painful,
Yeah.
but I realized that like the surgery I ended up having to go through when I was diagnosed with cancer years later, it was actually for my good. That came out because what was there was no longer serving me. And so
Mm.
that summary of events is really what pushed me into my purpose and continues to do so, because you have to rediscover who you are when parts of you change, when you're
Yeah.
no longer um, this career, when the children grow up and you're an empty nester, when parents are no longer earthside, when you're not attached to this person, or people go through divorce and they lose they feel like they never lose it, but they feel like they lose
Yeah.
their identity because something has changed. What I've learned is I've learned to anchor my identity to things that don't change about me. There are nuggets of who I was as a child that
Yeah.
have resurfaced as an adult, and I just use the same parts of me to walk in my purpose fully. And because who you are at 6 is authentically who you
Mhm.
are. And so 6-year-old me is just a little bit more mature, a little bit more wise. She got talks too much on all her report cards, and I talk for a living. And so the two of us are out here, doing what we're called to do.
Well, I love the way you tell that story, like how you tell it in the two very different ways, because even though the events are the same, what shifted in you was different and how you thought about it. And when you were talking, I couldn't help but think of how many people who are just so deeply anchored into what they do for a living, or they're really anchored into being so and so's husband or wife, or being a parent. What do you think is the biggest struggle for people when they lose one of those anchors?
Absolutely. That is what I see in my clients most. It's anchoring to things that are temporary. And the
Hmm.
challenge is when we don't realize what is temporary.
Mm.
I start a lot of my workshops out asking the question, who are you without titles? If you have to tell people who you are, not connected to any title or someone else getting the benefit, who are you? And so, I learned I am a child of God. That's something that anchors me, that doesn't change. It's not contingent on how I show up in a space. I bring that with me everywhere. I'm a communicator. I like to talk. I like to tell the story. I like to listen to the story. I like to read, whether it's written, verbal, whatever it is, I'm a communicator. So it is always important to me when I go into a space, how communication happens is something I'm going to notice because that's wired in who I am. I'm a connector. I like when this and this that are supposed to connect happen, whether it's people. I'm the friend that's always matchmaking people when I can. I'm like, oh, you should meet you. Or in business, the person who says, oh, you really should know this person.
Mhm.
Because that's who I am. I've always been that person. And so those things are the anchors about me that aren't connected to other people. Now they show up in my relationships,
Yeah.
but they're not anchored in my relationships. And so that's what happens when our identity is so much about mothering, when our children disappoint us, and they do, and they will, and they have, right?
Yeah.
When that happens, a lot of people question, oh, am I a good mother? Oh, that doesn't necessarily, how your child goes through the world doesn't necessarily, it's not always a reflection on the parents. I'm a living witness of that being true. My parents were amazing parents. I made horrible decisions at several parts of my life, and I knew better. And so, because I was on that side of it as well, I learned that my parents didn't anchor their identity in who we were and how we showed up. Had they done that, I think we would have lived a very different life. My parents were very much who they were, and so when they were planted, and we sat and we celebrated their lives and what they contributed and what they have left behind and what continues, we
Hmm.
were able to see um, that them being earthside was a part of our process, but I didn't have to bury myself with my parents. Some
Mm.
people do. Some
Yeah.
people, you attach parts of yourself, like, so this is my second marriage. I was married before. So if I had attached myself to my first husband, and that not working out, and I'm like, oh, I'm not good at being a wife, or I'm not good
Yeah.
at this, or I can't do this, then I never would have been open to try again. And so a lot of people attach bigger stories. They give things much more credit than they have. When I was diagnosed with breast cancer, my doctor's like, you have cancer. I'm like, I don't have cancer. I'm diagnosed with cancer.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you have something, you own it.
Hmm.
You own it. It belongs to you. So now, if I say that cancer belongs to me and then I go through treatment to get rid of it, my brain doesn't know what to believe. because of my words.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the times, even how we show up in spaces and what we do and what we say has everything to do with just the words that we use, how we frame things. That the way I told my story, that's a tactic that a lot of therapists and life coaches use. Technically, Purpose Doula is a form of life coaching, but
Hmm.
it's reframing. And
Yeah.
so once I learned to reframe everything about life. How, okay, yes, that's what you're saying, but what do I believe?
Hmm.
Okay, all right. When I was single, okay, I'm single, and people would make you feel bad for being single and happy, as if they can't coexist, or
Yeah.
you're compromising something. And it's like, well, what do I believe about myself? Am I happy? And so I decided that I wanted to be happy long before I got married, because I don't want my happiness to be connected or contingent on somebody else. Because if I
Yep.
don't come into this space happy, then now that I'm married, he is fully and solely responsible for me being happy. And that's a lot of pressure.
It is.
That is too much pressure. I don't want to put that much pressure on anybody. My oncologist studied cancer for years. I don't even put that much pressure on her to know what she's talking about when it comes to cancer. I come to my appointments with my questions. I have done
Hmm.
my research. I give my recommendations. She is a partner in my care, but she's not responsible for it. So a lot of the times when it comes to people's identity, they're making other people or other things responsible for their happiness, for their well-being, for their
Yeah.
identity, right? So if that thing goes away and it's responsible for you being happy, then now nobody's on the post, because you're not on the post, because I'm not on the
Mm. Wow, that is a lot to unpack.
post.
It's deep. It's so
It
deep,
is.
but it is everything you're saying just rings so true. First of all, how are you now? Like, are you in remission? Are you still under care? Like,
Yeah,
yes.
great question. So, I always say my wellness journey. So, a lot of people say cancer journey. I say wellness journey because
Hmm.
my destination was never cancer. It's always wellness. So, I said it that way. So, on my wellness journey, I'm still on the journey.
Okay.
I completed, I was diagnosed in 2020, then went into remission, then re-diagnosed in 2023. Went through chemotherapy and proton therapy again, chemo this twice. And now I'm in maintenance. Now we're
Yeah.
just monitoring. We're making sure, I call them my confirmation appointments. And so now I maintain my appointments that confirm that I'm healthy, whole, and well, because that's what I speak over myself daily.
Yeah.
And then I do my best to do the things that take care of my body. I have thanked her for alerting me that something was wrong. I was with someone over the weekend who was having pain in her knee, and she was like, "Oh, I'm so mad. I'm mad at my knee. I'm mad that my body is." I'm like, "No,
Mm.
it's communication. I'm a
Yeah.
communicator. When we have pain or something happens or they find something or see something, it's all communication." So I've had conversations and I said, "You know what? Thank you, body, for telling me." And so when she tells me she needs rest, that's what I do. When she tells me I need to exercise, even when I don't feel like it, that's what I do. And I try to eat things that help my body stay well. But yeah, at this point, I'm not in active treatment, and I am in remission, and will stay that way. I'm believing. I always say I might have a book that says it ran in my family until it ran into me, because cancer did some damage throughout my family. And I said, okay, well, I'm the one. I used to fight
Yeah.
for fun when I was in school. I liked to argue, and then I would get into physical altercations. And I realized that even that, when we talk about purpose, even my sassiness and my always, starting conflict, it had a purpose, because there were bigger things that God knew I was going to have to fight at some point in my life. So I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking.
I'm so glad to hear that. One of the things that I have realized with people who have dealt with cancer is they their outlook on life becomes very different, I have
Mhm.
found. and either more positively or more negatively. And it really does come from the place of how are you looking at it? Does it have you, or are you in charge of it? And it's clear that you don't have cancer,
Never had
right?
it.
It's
Yeah,
like it's just something that you have been treated for.
absolutely.
And I really believe that attitude goes a long way in terms of, how our bodies react. Um, I honestly believe that the body stores trauma, and it will tell us when things are too much, and it will show up, in ways we least expect it. And one of the things I wanted to touch on with you today is because I'm going to be putting this up the day after Mother's Day. You mentioned you lost your mother, which no, you didn't lose her. She went to
Mhm.
where she was supposed to go. You
Planted,
planted her,
absolutely.
yes. You planted her, but we miss our parents. I planted my mother as well, years and years ago. How, as women, do you feel that we reconfigure who we are after we lose our parents, especially those maybe who we were very close with? We talk about anchoring to each other. Like if we had a really close relationship or even a contentious one, there's still that
Yeah.
connection, right? Um, how do you find, having been through that, planting your mother, were you able to reconfigure who Asha is again?
Yes, and I will say that was when my mother transitioned, it was probably harder for me. I was diagnosed with cancer. My mother um, battled breast cancer as
Mm,
well, and in 2018 passed. And I always say my mother was very intentional. She was such a spiritual giant. She clearly she didn't lose her battle with cancer. She made a conscious decision of how long she wanted to deal with it. She didn't want to be a burden on the family. She
mm,
didn't want to, there were certain things that she didn't want to happen. And so it was a very clear, conscious decision. Um, and so I trust my mother knew what she was doing. You know
mm,
what I'm saying? And I know that there are people who they plant their parents like I'm a bonus mom. I absolutely love my bonus son. And his mother transitioned when he was young.
mm,
And so I've learned to find inspiration. If there were young women in my program who had lost, their parents had, their mother had transitioned, and I find inspiration from the people who have dealt with it longer than I have. Like even thinking about a child who experienced loss at 12, 13, gave me hope to know that in my 30s, I could get through it because I could find hope from someone else. And then I connected with people who
yeah,
also understood what I had. I'm an advocate. I am an advocate for community. Like I said, I'm a connector.
yeah,
And so community is always important to me. I am in support groups. Even when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I got a therapist specifically for breast cancer. I got a therapist just specifically for life because the panoramic was happening. The world was shut down. I say
yeah.
panoramic. I'm very careful with my words, but people say pandemic, but pandemic was scary. And I was dealing with another scary word. And I'm like, I'm
Hmm.
not adding another scary word to
It's
my
like I have
vocabulary.
enough to deal
I have
with right
enough.
now.
So how do I reframe this? And so I say panoramic because it helped me have a 360-degree. We saw
Hmm.
360-degree view of what the world was, right?
Yeah.
And so I have learned just that she's not gone. She's shifted. So I like the phrase transitioned
Hmm.
because there are parts of my mother that consistently show up in my daughter, that consistently show up. Even when I was diagnosed, interestingly enough, like I said, my mother dealt with cancer as well. And the day that I found out, her medical book kept falling in my bag. We were actually packing up our home, our childhood home, and it kept falling into my book. And I'm like flipping through it, didn't really realize what it was. It was almost like take this with you. Like, you're going to need this. And
Mm.
then I found things in my book. I found a journal that had some of her prayers in it. My mother had prayed for me, like in her cancer, like she had a journal specifically for her cancer journey, her wellness journey as well. And in that journal, I'm the one of three daughters that she was like, help Asha, Lord, help Asha. And
Mm.
I'm like, I don't know what I probably was going through something else at the time, but the way that that resonated with me when I saw it and I was sitting in chemotherapy, I'm like, she left me exactly what I needed.
Wow,
And
what a
so I think a
gift.
lot of the times finding a new way to connect with them, and not in a talking, for me personally, um talking to the, like, I still have conversations with my mother. I don't expect her to answer in the same way, similar to how I would have a conversation with God, be like, oh man, ma, you missed a good one. Even, my father is planted as well, so I have conversations with daddy too. And I have found that they have left so much of them in me
Hmm.
that there are times where I'm like, are you in there? Where did that come from? I sound like you. So not so much anchoring in the sense of feeling lost that they're not here, but finding new ways to see where they are. When I'm sitting in church and I'm hearing a sermon and somebody uses a phrase, like my father would ask, he did a lot of call and response when he gave sermons. And
Okay.
so when I'm in a church and somebody does that, it always feels like a nod from my dad.
Hmm.
And if I see people pray in a certain way, there was a way that my mother threw up her hands when she was in worship. When I'm in a church service, there's always somebody that'll do it. And I'm like, hey, Ma, you know what I'm saying? And so I found, even in nature, birds, I'll see a set of cardinals, and I think of
Oh
my
yeah,
parents.
cardinals.
Yeah, because we're from Illinois, so cardinals is Illinois state bird, and so whenever I see a cardinal in Virginia, I always see them in pairs. And so I always think like those type of things aren't accidental.
Mm.
I'm not even sure if I know how to exactly explain them away, but I started looking for remnants of my parents, because I do understand my father was also a scientist. And one of the things that science says is energy doesn't die, it transitions. So that energy will only die if we allow it to die. So we talk about them often.
Mm.
We say their names often. I was with my sisters over the weekend and we talked about, what mommy would do and what daddy would do. And so those type of things help anchor, um, absolutely help with the process, so that you don't stick in grief. Grief becomes something. And I use the phrase planted
Yeah.
intentionally, because when you plant something, you expect something to grow from whatever's planted. And so I'm always just looking for the fruit from their lives. And I understand that I'm partially responsible to make that happen.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I absolutely love the imagery that you use when you explain this, how we see, our loved ones who have transitioned and figuring out what that means for us. And we're going to have a part two sometime, Asha, because there's so much to talk about here, but
Gladly.
time is not our friend, unfortunately, with Zoom. But I wanted to let everyone know that I will list all of Asha's social media handles so that if you need to give birth to your purpose, you can reach out to her. And I wanted to thank you so much for being an amazing guest today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I have a grief resource that I'll send to you that you can share
Okay.
complimentary. I'll get the link up and going, because that may be something, since this conversation went in that direction, I feel like all things happen how they're supposed to. So
Yeah.
I'll get that to you and we'll share that with your audience, to make sure that people have what they need to take this conversation further before we can take the conversation further. So thank you
Thank
for
you
having
so
me.
much. And thank you all for joining us at the Fearless and Fabulous podcast. It is the space where we thrive no matter our age or size. Please like, share, subscribe, and please follow my guests as well. Thank you so much.